Most of us, well, I assume most of us don't believe China when they say, here are the real numbers. They're claiming they had no new cases over a certain period. Nobody buys it. But they are trying to lift restrictions. And this is resulting in some strange happenings and some desperate situations. One of the things that happened after they first lifted the restrictions was they immediately put them back in place for theaters. Now, in the city of Wuhan, where they're lifting restrictions, they're still not allowing people to leave, which has resulted in riots. The Daily Mail reports riots erupt in China's coronavirus epicenter, Wuhan, where deadly bug was detected last year, as lockdown travel restrictions are lifted for the first time in 2 months for 11 million people, but they're still not allowed to leave the city. Angry crowds rioted near the Chinese city of Wuhan after the region's 2-month coronavirus lockdown was lifted, but residents were told they could not travel elsewhere in China. Shocking footage showed a mob overturning a police van on a bridge linking Wuhan, which is the capital of Hubei province, and neighboring Jiangxi. The violent scenes came despite a move by the authorities on Saturday to allow people in Wuhan from elsewhere in the country for the first time since coronavirus emerged in the city in late December last year. Hundreds of people were pictured arriving at the city's railway station on Saturday, but people cannot leave until April 8th, and the vast majority of shops are still shut. We can see the videos here where people started flipping this police van. Now, what's crazy is apparently the local cops were with them against the other local cops. I don't know exactly what the exact details are, but this shows. I don't want to speculate too far in advance, but China is destabilizing over this. And they're certainly lying. In the video showing anger at the restrictions, which was posted on the Twitter account of Radio Free Asia, crowds were seen clashing with police. The groups were seen hurling themselves at ranks of officers who were lined up to block the bridge across the Yangtze River. Some used police riot shields as makeshift weapons, and one man was seen kicking a police car's window. According to Radio Free Asia, the clashes were sparked by the authorities' refusal to allow people from Hubei to go to Jiangxi. People are said to have been heard chanting, "Let's go Hubei," as they clash with police. Now, you got to understand how serious this is. People in China get detained, tortured, put in detention camps when they even speak up. For people to actually attack the cops in a riot and flip a vehicle down, I'll tell you what, man, it is easy for a government to deter its people at the threat of, at gunpoint. In the United States, we have constitutional protection, so it's a bit harder. And we're a bit, stubborn, hard-headed, liberty-minded, I would say. But in China, they've been beaten down, and this is a part of their daily life. I was reading about why it is that so many people refuse to speak up, blow the whistle, or defend themselves, and it's because they grew up in generation after generation of communist lockdown. This is their normal. To see these people going after the police and flipping vehicles says to me, the breakdown is substantially worse than we even realize. We see riots all the time. Now, there may be protests and riots in China for sure, but I don't know. To this extent, it seems like things are really breaking down in China. And what worries me is we're kind of looking to China and other European countries as a forecast of what we can expect. Now, it's not entirely the same. They got 1.3 billion people. They're an authoritarian communist dictatorship. But we can look to places like Italy. I think we're going to see people get arrested. I think we're going to see protests. If the supply chains get disrupted, man, it'll be bad. I've seen what people do when they don't have food. And what's your option? If you need to eat, you will find a way to eat. People freak out. They say Wuhan was placed under lockdown in January, with roadblocks, ring fencing its outskirts, and drastic restrictions on daily life for 11 million inhabitants. The reopening of the city, where the epidemic first erupted in late December, marks a turning point in China's fight against the virus. However, the contagion has since spread to over 200 countries, infecting more than 600,000 people and killing 27,674 so far. In China, more than 80,000 have been infected, and there have been 3,295 reported deaths. And I got to say, that sounds like complete BS. You mean to tell me that they've been infected longer, they have 4 times as many people as we do, and they have less people infected than we do? I'm not buying it. Among those on the first high-speed trains allowed into Wuhan on Saturday morning was Guo Liangkai, a 19-year-old student whose 1-month work stint in Shanghai stretched to 3 months due to the clampdown on movement. "It makes me very happy that I can see my family," Guo told Reuters after being greeted by his mother at the main station. We wanted to hug, but now is a special period, so we can't hug or take any actions like these. Authorities took draconian measures to stop people from entering or leaving the industrial city of 11 million people in central China. Families were confined to their homes. Bus and taxi services were shut, and only essential stores were allowed to remain open. We can see a whole bunch of photos here. Everybody's wearing masks. I think the resumption of work represents a kind of hope. It at least shows that China is victorious, said Zhang Yilun, 35, returning to Wuhan for work. Now, I'll tell you what, I don't trust them, but they are easing restrictions and people are showing up back to work, at least according to these sources and these photos. It could all be lies and Chinese propaganda. I honestly don't know, but I think there's good reason for us to hope this is the case. Now, while we're watching riots, because people want the quarantine lifted sooner, if this is if this is the case, 2 months, it's good news, man. Because we've heard from these other outlets that it could be potentially 2 years. I'm not saying they're correct, but that could be a serious issue for us. China's National Health Commission said on Saturday that 54 new coronavirus cases were reported on the mainland on Friday, all involving so-called imported cases. Wuhan accounts for about 60% of China's coronavirus cases, but they have fallen sharply in recent weeks, a sign that the measures are working. The last confirmed locally transmitted case of the virus in Wuhan was on Monday. With the US, Italy, and Spain and other countries now battling soaring infections, China is focusing on the risk posed by imported cases, most of them Chinese returning home. Effective Saturday, China suspended the entry of foreign nationals with valid Chinese visas and residence permits. You may have seen my main segment video where I'm facing a quarantine. I don't know exactly what to do or what to expect, but I have seen some people say, too little, too late, Donald Trump. Notably, Brian Stelter of CNN said, it's too late. You're 2 weeks too late. You should have quarantined the city weeks ago. Everyone's already fled. I don't know when too little, too late is. Perhaps it could be too late for the most part, but it still would make sense to lock down to a certain degree. I don't know. How would you enforce the same restrictions like we're seeing in China? If people in China are going to riot because they're not allowed to leave or enter a city, what do you think would happen if they did this in New York? People in New York riot already. They riot. You give them a reason and they'll start screaming, eat the rich or the 99% or whatever, let alone locking them in when people are panicking and there's an actual threat to their health. I don't see how the U.S. can handle this. If it's true that China has been able to reduce the number of infected, it may just be because they're an authoritarian dictatorship. Now, look, I am not praising that. I'm not defending that. The sad reality is, with, the more freedoms you have, the more risks you take on. And so that means, you can live in literal hell, like, in China, where they have people in camps having their organs harvested. But it also means that after they force you to lock down and barricade you in your home, they can get through this much faster and more easily than we can. I err on the side of freedom. I would rather forego a bit of the security in exchange for the freedom. I would rather be relying on myself than crossing my fingers and hoping the machine would save me. They report. Staff, some in full body protective gear, and volunteers bustled around the railway station in the morning, setting out hand disinfectant and putting up signs reminding travelers they need a mobile phone-based health code to take public transport. Yikes, man. A worker walked through one metro station carrying a signboard reading, "Wear a mask for the entire journey. People should not gather, and when you disembark, please scan the health code." Everyone is taking the right precautions, so there shouldn't be a problem. Yuan Hai, 30, a passenger on a reopened metro line, said when asked about the risks. But you have to be careful, they added. The existence of unknown asymptomatic carriers of coronavirus in China has raised concerns among the public that lifting the restrictions may release thousands of people who could still be spreading the virus that caused COVID-19 without knowing they are sick. Life in Wuhan remains far from normal. The vast majority of shops are shut, while bright yellow roadblocks remain. Some people at the railway station, such as a woman who only gave her surname as Yang, said they were there to see if there was any chance people could leave earlier. Her grandson came to visit for the week-long Lunar New Year holiday in January and has been separated from his parents in the southern city of Shenzhen ever since. And that's why I thought it was relevant to bring this up. Trump's talking about a quarantine, as I mentioned. Will we see something similar? People who are visiting friends stuck in New York or New Jersey? People trapped, not able to see their friends, people fleeing, or riots on highways because the government has locked things down. They say with schools reopening, they're hoping they can get back soon. Let's just grab a conclusion on this one. They say, based on data from several quarantine facilities in Wuhan, between 5 and 10% of patients who had been pronounced recovered had tested positive again. NPR spoke to 4 people who tested positive for a second time this month. They reportedly did not show any of the classic symptoms of the virus, such as a fever or dry cough. The time from their first recovery to being tested ranged from a few days to a few weeks. And that may be, it may be a mistake that China's opening things up. The fact that they would re-shutter theaters says to me, I wouldn't be surprised if they lock everything down again, because it's not enough. People are getting reinfected, they're testing positive. How long will this go on for? I don't know. And that's what worries me about the quarantine here in Jersey. I don't know if Trump's going to implement it, but if he does, am I stuck here for a long time? And how do I get supplies? How do I take care of myself? And will I be trapped here? For the most part, I'm a bit of a homebody working on these 2 shows, my main show and then the Timcast IRL podcast with my buddy Adam. So we haven't really gone out anyway. And we just skate in the backyard, play video games and board games and stuff. So it seems like for us, things won't really change all that much. But my fear is if things never recover and things break down worse, I don't want to be trapped. I got a couple more segments for you coming up in a few minutes. I'll see you all shortly.